The 1986 killing of Sherry Rasmussen was one of the most disturbing crimes of the era. Her body was discovered by her husband John Rutten in their Van Nuys, California apartment in 1986 after she was beaten and shot to death in what appeared to be a botched burglary. For many years, investigators made little headway despite plenty of evidence. Rasmussen's murder became a cold case that remained unsolved for 23 years. But then in 2009, new forensic technology allowed investigators to identify a new suspect, Stephanie Lazarus, a Los Angeles police officer. While re-examining the evidence in 2009, officials noted several inconsistencies. The front door of the building was not forced open, and a stack of electronic equipment appeared to have been positioned to make the scene look more like a burglary. A DNA test showed a bite mark on Rasmussen's arm had been made by a woman, compelling investigators to draw up a short list of female suspects that included Lazarus. She was then interviewed and arrested after her saliva from a discarded cup was matched to the bite mark. Lazarus had actually been flagged as a suspect back in the 1980s by Rasmussen's father. Back then, he tried to convince police to investigate her, but his concerns were dismissed. He also tried to compel detectives to use DNA analysis, but the evidence remained unexamined for many years.
He was always diverted. He was told repeatedly that he'd been watching too much TV.
The 2012 trial of Stephanie Lazarus was a major media event. She was depicted as a scorned woman who grew embittered when her lover announced that he was going to marry someone else. Before we get into the crime, the relationship between Lazarus and Rutten was complicated. You see, they were never really boyfriend-girlfriend. They knew each other since college and had gone on dates per se, but there was never a formal relationship, at least in Rutten's eyes. Lazarus, on the other hand, was madly in love with him. Rasmussen had been shot 3 times in the chest. Lazarus had a .38 Smith & Wesson, which most LAPD cops carried as their backup firearm at the time, and it was matched to the one used at the scene. Records showed that she reported the weapon missing days after the murder, suggesting that she had disposed of it. Looking back on it, the murder seems like a classic case of a crime of passion, but it took 23 years for anyone to figure that out. The key evidence was the DNA from the bite mark. Lazarus' defense team tried to undermine the evidence with accusations that the sample had been improperly stored and handled, but the jury was convinced. Lazarus pleaded not guilty, but chose not to take the stand in her own defense. At the conclusion of her trial, she was sentenced to 27 years to life. In 2013, Lazarus and her legal team appealed her conviction. The 182-page filing raised issues with the amount of time that had passed between the opening of the case and the testing of the DNA samples. The delay, it argued, was negligent and denied Lazarus due to process of law. It also claimed that the presiding judge had been prejudiced in favor of the prosecution, having denied all the defense's pretrial motions. The case came before the Court of Appeals in July 2015. Lazarus's attorney laid out the grounds for reconsideration, but they were rejected by the court. Presiding Justice Nora Minella ruled that the delay was legitimate and said that the claim that the court was prejudiced in the murder trial was, quote, speculative in the extreme.
There are so many twists and turns in this.
Stephanie Lazarus has remained behind bars ever since her appeal failed to overturn her 2012 conviction. She continues to be held at the California Institution for Women in Chino, California. In 2023, she became eligible for parole, a development that drew a great deal of media attention. It was during her first parole hearing that she finally publicly admitted her culpability for the crime and expressed what she claimed were feelings of remorse, as she said, "It makes me sick to this day that I took an oath to protect and serve people, and I took Sherry Rasmussen's life from her, a nurse. I didn't do the right thing because I didn't want to face the consequences of my actions. I didn't want to go to prison." During this time, the public also got the first insight into Lazarus' life in prison. Inmates who served time alongside her have spoken positively about her. Jane Dorotic, whose own murder conviction was overturned and who now works for the Los Angeles Innocence Project, claimed, "Stephanie is kind, compassionate, and a dedicated individual. She has taken full responsibility for her actions." Lazarus' supporters have also pointed to the rehabilitation work she has undertaken behind bars, as well as her involvement in educational programs and other activities aimed at helping her fellow prisoners. Lazarus was initially deemed to be suitable for parole following her first hearing in November 2023. However, news that she may be set free was met with criticism so fierce that the governor's office recommended a reappraisal of the parole board ruling. During a fresh hearing in 2024, Lazarus' supporters praised her as a reformed character, but relatives of Sherry Rasmussen tearfully reminded the board of the pain that Lazarus had brought to their lives. As her widowed husband John Rutten said, she lied for decades until her only option was to pursue parole. Rutten also highlighted the premeditated and brutal nature of his wife's murder as he added, "Sherry's parents lost her child and her sisters lost a dear friend. For me, the reality of the pain never subsides." The California Board of Parole hearings announced in May 2024 that Lazarus's parole is now on hold. Then in October 2024, it was announced that she would not be paroled, following a 90-minute hearing before 3 commissioners from the California Parole Board. Family lawyer John Taylor revealed that Rasmussen's relatives were happy with the decision and said in a statement, "It's unfair to the family that she should now go free and enjoy her life while receiving her LAPD pension."